A lot of people have asked for this. I feel like since he got some buffs, maybe this is a good time to go over our boy Anub'arak. And so yeah, we'll do Anub'arak here. Okay, Anub'arak. Okay. We just played Anub'arak on stream, and a lot of people have asked for an Anub'arak video. I've held off on Anub'arak videos because, one, I feel he's a super niche tank, and two, I was kind of hoping he'd get a rework at some point. So the biggest problem with Anub'arak is his health pool. They try and buff it. The biggest offensive problem, the reason why they have trouble balancing Anub'arak, is because of his level 1 or his level 20 talent of Rewind. Anub'arak has insane stuns, like double stuns. There's almost no tank in the game that can do this, and so they have to base it around accordingly. You've got your stun from Impale, your E then Q is a normal combo, your Q can peel, your E can peel. There's a lot of things you can do with Anub'arak. So a lot of what Anub'arak is about positioning and trying to make plays for the team and looking for the right plays. So this is one of the hardest tanks to play because you're pretty much an all-in tank. Now, for what it's worth, you're not technically all in. You're an all-in engage and hoping to get out. You don't want to stay in too long. And so a lot of this comes down to the play of Anub'arak. Anub'arak also has one of the largest hitboxes in the game. So if you do charge somebody, charging somebody and getting a stun off of this from your E is actually really good because it says it briefly stuns. It's a small stun, which is normally when you stun with your Q after. So one of the plays that you can make is to make sure and stun an area and stun a person. Then use your Q to force another stun. But while you're doing that, start to maneuver around. Q them and then work and stand behind them. This works really good against targets that you're trying to kill because your body blocking is one of the key components of Anub'arak. It can hurt you or it can help you. I'm not saying you always want to get behind a person, but this is one of the biggest pros of having an Anub'arak is using your body blocks accordingly. So utilizing that, and then of course your shield is the biggest thing. You get a big shield, which makes up for your lack of a health pool, and this is on a pretty short cooldown. It lasts for 3 seconds. Most of the time it just gets popped. Anub'arak is very bad against auto attack heroes. I'm taking a little more time not going into the talent yet because it's all about playstyle with Anub'arak. Stun, get in, try and make the play. Now if you're a tank player and you're playing with mages, technically they should be following up your CC. That's perfect. If I'm playing with a Kalthas and he throws out a Flame Strike over here, and then I go in, I'm like, boom, nailed him. I got 4 people in a stun. Guess what? You're probably not doing any damage because you didn't see where your team's damage was. And so that's one of the hardest parts about playing Anub'arak because it's very easy to see where he's stunning. Getting people to follow up is another story. So you kind of have the responsibility of also watching your team. So we're going to talk about the talents. And this is going to be one of the builds to where there's diversity at a pretty heavy extent, mostly because all of Anub'arak's power, most of his power is in his abilities, and his talents just kind of help. They're supplemental and not in a major way. Regeneration Master is probably the hardest talent in the game to finish as far as level 1 talents go. 30 regen globes is ridiculous. This is one of the most ridiculous talents in the entire game. Health regen is never an issue because you normally die fast enough to where health regen doesn't really matter nearly as much as your base health. Completing this means that you have to be on a very specific map like Tomb of the Spider Queen, and as much as I would love to recommend this, the odds of you finishing it are slim to none, and you're trying to play. Anub'arak is already a late game hero. Making him late game even more by way of a talent is even more depressing, but it is viable in the right situation. We got to look at the other ones. So increased Hardened Carapace spell armor by 20. This works really good against double mage comps. Not really that great. But overall, Legion of Beetles is okay. His level 1 talents are actually pretty terrible. This gives you extra spell armor, which means they can block more abilities. As you can see, Anub'arak is kind of like an anti-mage tank. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it always works. Because if there's one auto attacker on the other team, it's a miserable experience. All of these are pretty subpar when it comes to general talents, and depending on what you need, Legion of Beetles is about as standard as it gets. Nerubian Armor, very specific against the enemy team, and Regen Master, very specific to the map. If it's a good map for it, I actually like this more than the other ones, because getting base health on Anub'arak to make him like every other tank would be pretty nice, just almost uncompletable. Level 4. Now, all of these are good in very specific situations, and we'll try and touch on each of them very, very quickly. Bed of Barbs and Under King are the most common ones. Bed of Barbs probably being the one that you should be picking more and not picking Under King. Under King means that you're trying to get into the enemy team. It increases the range and its damage. If you're playing an Anub'arak for damage, you need to stop it, okay? You already have 800 forms of CC. You don't need to all of a sudden become a melee assassin. What you need to do is create a setup man. That's what you are. That's what you do. And so all that you're going to get from Under King is that extra damage and the range. The range can be made up for with proper positioning. The range can also help you get out, but you shouldn't rely on this to be your engagement tool unless you are a 5-man deathball comp that actually takes advantage of this talent. The damage is nice if you have a CC train and you know that you're going to kill a single target. Finding a coordinated team. Now, there are a lot of people that can make the argument, yeah, but if my team follows up, then my damage means that we get a kill. I agree. Find that in most of your games and let me know how that works for you. Bed of Barbs kind of functions in a very similar way. Create a bed of spikes along Impale's path that slows enemies by 25%. Spikes persist for 3.5 seconds. This can help you peel. This can help you set up even more. I like this one a lot because it can help zone out my team. You can use this. You don't have to EQ. You can Q first to make sure that people can't walk through that area. You have a 3.5 second area that just says, nope, you can't pass because there's spikes on the ground and it'll dismount you or slow you, and that works to your advantage. And if I EQ, then all of a sudden they're slowed and they're having trouble walking away after already being CC'd like crazy. So I think Bed of Barbs is the more general pick. I like this a lot more. Under King is a more specific to your comp style, or you just have no fear of the enemy team and you just want to YOLO. But also Shed Exoskeleton. This is actually really underrated. This takes care of one of Anub'arak's semi-problems, is that going in is easy. Nobody will ever complain about how hard it is to engage with Anub'arak. I press E, I go in. It's a pretty big distance. Getting out, I don't have E anymore. So once I'm in, I'm committed. So Shed Exoskeleton actually allows me to move faster. Now I'd recommend that if you are picking this, that you already have it in your mind that you're going into chitinous plating. You don't have to pick it, but chitinous plating is normally what it pairs with. Playing against heroes that are going to do periodic damage very quickly can make sure that you get this up. And Hardened Carapace is movement speed. So now you can A, move quite successfully. You can get in and out. You can reposition yourself much easier to make an easier retreat or a further engage. So I think a lot of these are good. Shed Exoskeleton is kind of you're playing with a future mindset. But Bed of Barbs, I think, is the safe one. Under King, okay. And let's talk about the level 7 talents, because all of these are good and all of these are defensive talents. Chitinous Plating says, while Hardened Carapace is active, taking damage from enemy abilities reduces its cooldown by 1 second up to 3 seconds. As a tank, this is pretty easy to proc. You just have to take damage 3 times from abilities, not autos, but abilities, and that's normally pretty easy to do. When you consider that your health pool is very low as Anub'arak, and this is after the recent buff that he got, small one, you get a shield of 340. So your base damage is like 2250, and then you get 340, making you around 2600. For reference, most tanks fall within 27 to 2800, and for super reference, Stitches is like 3100. So you are significantly weaker than most other tanks by way of a health pool, and you have to play around your shield accordingly. Spell armor can only take you so far. So in this situation, you now have much more frequent shields that can help out quite a bit. If I'm going against like a Raynor and a Cassia, or a Raynor and a Greymane, it's going to be a little awkward because auto attackers are my biggest counter, and they don't use a lot of abilities. Tanks can help proc this. There's a lot of ways to proc this. But getting more shields means more effective health and being able to spam your W button a little more. Subterranean Shield. Go back to the part about this is going to allow me to super engage. So now I'm all in. I have a dive ball comp of like Kerrigan and Yrel, which is really cool. And I get to play in. And that makes it really easy to kind of go in and feel confident that I have people with me and people that can also help support me in that situation. So now I get a big shield going in. So granting that shield for 5 seconds is kind of the same as just getting a cooldown on something that's almost the exact same size, except getting it more often. See where we're going with this? So a lot of people think that they go into Under King and therefore they must go into Subterranean Shield. When in reality, you could probably just go chitinous plating and get an extra shield for free and just cycle those. You could stack your shields, of course, but this isn't always necessary. Leeching Scarabs also isn't terrible. Beetles gain 30% bonus attack damage, and they heal for 50% of the damage with each attack he is nearby. If you are playing into that, I would really recommend to make sure to go Legion of Beetles. Every time you use an ability, E, W, or Q, you're going to get a beetle coming out, and so you can use that to your advantage. We just muted that. We'll get to that in a second. But using your W can spawn a beetle, and that can help you block a skill shot. There's several things you can do with just pressing W. You don't have to be actively engaged. It's a 7-second cooldown. I can use this to block skill shots. Me and Li Ming counter each other. I block her skill shots, but she also uses Disintegrate to pop my cocoon, which we'll get into in a second. But I really think chitinous plating is really underrated. If I'm going into beetles, which I actually don't think is a terrible build anymore, it still has a lot of flaws. This is not bad. Subterranean Shield, more specific to heavy dive comps, which if you're a Anub'arak, you normally are, which means that you don't normally want to pick a Anub'arak early because your team might not draft around it. Try and save this for more of a counter pick. Level 10, really Cocoon is the only option here. Locust Swarm means that they have absolutely nobody. If there is one person to Cocoon, yes, I'm cocooning them. They have a Cho'Gall, they have an Ana, they have somebody. I'm going to take care of them. Now the hard part with this is, let's say they have Li Ming, Tassadar, and Lucio. All of a sudden, Cocoon is not based on how much damage it takes, it's depleted by how frequently it takes damage. So fast auto attackers and fast damage people, let's say it's Tychus and Tassadar, they both attack 4 times per second. They'll pop that Cocoon in no time. I can Cocoon one, the other one should conceivably pop it open. Ana, dot damage works the exact same way. So I do have to consider the idea that sometimes Cocoon's not going to be good based on they counter it pretty hard. If there's a Li Ming on the other team and they don't go Disintegrate, my life is much easier. If they don't go Disintegrate, then it's easier. If they do go Disintegrate, I might want to consider just cocooning the Li Ming. It's not always the sexy pick, but it takes away some damage. You're already countering them with beetles, which kind of hurts the value of your cocoon. But at the same time, you can still take one person out of a fight and force somebody else to draw attention over there. So there's a lot of ways to utilize cocoon. Locust Swarm, it's damage per second around you. The heal around this, to me, is kind of comical. This means they have a heavy clump team that I can actually get value out of Locust Swarm. And normally I'm going to go Cocoon anyways. Locust Swarm is only a hyper-specific moment that I don't even really want to get into because you should probably be finding ways to make use of Cocoon. Now, if you and your team are roaming, you can hit double stuns, or maybe your team is 5 seconds away. Boom, double stun. You're not going anywhere. Now I've stopped you here. And now I cocoon, and I just wait for this cocoon to wear off. My team's going to show up. They have nobody to pop the cocoon. It's going to last long enough to where now we can CC and get there. There's multiple ways you can use cocoon, or you can just flat out cocoon them, look at the bar coming down, and then time your stuns accordingly and make sure your team can kill them. There's a lot of different ways to use cocoon to either set up kills, to save people, to take people out of a fight, to give you an advantage. There's multiple different ways to use cocoon, which is why you should always be looking to pick it. 13, a long time ago, Anub'arak and several other tanks used to have decent auto attack damage, like 100 to 110 baseline. Now, I think Anub'arak's like 80 something. Maybe that's even too high. Acid Drenched Mandibles used to be really good because of that. Since then, all those talents are nerfed, and Anub'arak, this fell off the wayside when his auto attacks went away. Recently, Burning Beetles, this was tweaked. It got changed, it got buffed. It just recently got nerfed. This is actually pretty decent. Deal 21 damage per second, so you get more burning area around you, and beetles do extra damage. Now, if I went beetle build, I'm probably going this no matter what. Going back to the idea of W build actually being really strong as a tank, Shed Exoskeleton gives me the movement speed. I get cooldown reduction. Guess what? I go in. I can now EQW, and I get some burst damage by going Urticating Spine. This is going to deal double damage to heroes. So this now means that that extra damage that I'm trying to get and trying to get all that bonus damage now could potentially work. This isn't a huge amount of damage, but it does add to the impact of hitting a priority target. If I'm going into W build at 4 and 7, all of a sudden this looks phenomenal. I'm pressing this. You're talking about a 7-second cooldown. that I'm doing 160 level 0 damage, and then I'm getting a cooldown of potentially 3 seconds. So I have a 4-second ability that does 160 damage at level 0, so around 165, 170 damage at level 1, and then scaling takes care of the rest. If you're telling me every 4 seconds I can do AoE damage around me for that much, it's going to be a lot more than burning beetles could ever give me. 21 damage per second, not that great, but 160 damage instantly, and then having cooldown reduction all of a sudden makes this a really good talent. So I think both of these are really good. Burning beetles, very easy to get value out of. You don't have to worry about W cooldown. But if you did go chitinous plating, you should be going urticating spines and playing around that. 16, we recently saw a change to debilitation, to where before it was just hitting people with your burrow charge would reduce their spell power. If I'm going against heavy mages or certain areas where I'm going to be diving key targets, this does work well. It no longer requires for you to just use your E. Normally your E, a lot of times you want to save for mobility to maybe get out. I can easily just waddle my way in and press Q onto people. It's not always easy, but it does mean that I have my E available if necessary. Since Anub'arak is very aggressive, most of the time you're probably using your E. But this means that if you miss, now you can hit one target and then aim at another, and you still get value out of a level 16 talent. It took a long time for this to come into play, but I actually like it. Epicenter is another one, increases burrow charge impact area. This is actually pretty huge. The impact area is what makes this really good, but getting cooldown reduction, I mean, as an Anub'arak, 14 seconds for any ability is a long time. The fact that this is 1 second, normally if you hit more than 2 heroes, like you did really good. Normally you're hitting 1 to 2 people, and that's okay. So getting cooldown reduction, 13 to 12 second cooldown instead of 14, it's nothing major. So what it is, it's more about the area that allows you to hit more people to allow you to get the second part of that. So this can be really good for those reasons when I know that I'm diving several squishy targets or even a main area. This does mean that I'm hitting targets and I'm not using this defensively. So if I found myself using more defensive talents, I'm definitely not going this, but this can help the offense. Debilitation, I don't mind this. I don't think it's super great, but against certain people, it can be good. I mean, think about this. If I'm playing a Kerrigan or an Alarak, a lot of them are ability damage. If I can reduce their spell power by 50%, that's good. I don't have to just worry about the Chromies and the Kalthoses and the Li Mings. Like, this works against melee the same way. It works against everybody, don't get me wrong, but it's spell power, not just damage, like some of the other things have. Looking at you, Diablo. Lastly, Beetlejuiced, getting extra health. Okay, it means they survive longer. It means I went beetle build the full way. And every 4th basic attack spawns a beetle. So this can work. As a tank and any character, you should be auto-attacking a lot no matter what. I doubt for the majority of the people this is going to be a great talent. So I don't really recommend this. Epicenter is normally okay. All of these are kind of weak if you don't know how to use them. If you know how to use them and know what moments to use them in, then they make sense. Now, for the only reason that Anub'arak cannot be balanced in this game, and the #1 reason why I look for an Anub'arak rework that seemingly never happens. There is only one talent on this talent tier that you should ever pick. Ever. I don't know what the only time I'd pick Hardened Shield is if it's like, oh, we're sieging up on core and we just hit 20 and I need to live. That's it. Rewind is insane on Anub'arak. Somebody that has 2 stuns in their kit with Rewind is actually insane. This is one of the most broken things in the entire game. If they got rid of Rewind, I think that they could find other ways to balance the hero without making him super busted late game by way of Rewind. If you've ever played against a Rewind Anub'arak, you know that being stunned out of your mind by one person is a miserable experience. This is worse than Diablo. It's basically worse than anything on you. Maybe a Murd in Rewind is kind of close, but getting taken to Pound Town by double stun into double stun feels real bad as an Anub'arak. If they could get rid of Rewind, I think they could open up the talent tree. But this is what keeps Anub'arak, I think, extremely limited. Because everybody knows Anub'arak is a late game hero or a counter. Take away some of that other weird stuff and get rid of this, and I think you could actually have a really good hero on your hands. So I'm hoping that Rewind goes away. But Rewind is an excellent late game engage tool. You find anybody, even slightly out of position, E, Q, 1, or wherever your button is, E, Q. Now, I will say this, make sure you're auto attacking. So like EQ is fine. Auto, EQ, auto. Ideally, you could probably auto a little bit more in there, but make sure that you're getting that bonus damage. They're not going anywhere. They are not going anywhere. So you can make sure and get those few extra autos in, give yourself a couple extra 100 damage to make sure that person dies. If you're not taking free damage, you need to learn to auto attack, okay? Like we're talking about free damage that you are taking away from yourself. If you just EQ, rewind, EQ, that's actually wasteful and a complete terrible use of rewind. You can also use this to go in. You don't necessarily always have to use this as an engagement. You can EQ, not use rewind, get on top of a target, see how things transpire. If your E and your Q come up again, then you can now try it and double stun after that. You don't always have to instantly use this. It's not like, I see them, I got to use my buttons. You don't have to use it that way. But overall, Anub'arak is an all-in tank. If you're just playing Anub'arak for the first time, I would really recommend technically any of these except for Regen Master unless the map calls for it. Either of these are okay. I do like Legion of Beetles a little more because it's easier to use and I'm not normally trying to hard counter a bunch of stuff. But if they have big damage, a rewind Chromie, which I'm unstoppable when I'm using my E, so I can get rid of that. I can just E under the ground and I'm okay. I think Shed Exoskeleton is phenomenal with chitinous plating. If you want to play a little bit different style, Bed of Barbs is great for zoning. You don't always have to EQ. There's a dive team coming at you. You press Q, you stun them as they're running up. I don't have to use my E as offense all the time. So Bed of Barbs gives me that ability to come out there and make some plays. It's slightly shorter cooldown than my E. Under King is kind of a trap for a lot of people that are learning Anub'arak. It looks appealing. And any talent, for whatever reason in the game says, does more damage. Boom, snap block. It doesn't always work that way, team. It doesn't always work that way. Try playing around more defensive options and things like that as Anub'arak. You already got a ton of offense. When you need more offense, it's because your team is a full death ball comp of just run at them and kill them with all 5 people. Normally, that's not the case. Chitinous plating, I think, is amazing. Gives you a lot more effective health in a lot of these. Subterranean Shield is, again, only if you're all in. Leeching Scarabs, if it's more patient approach, where it's more of a poke battle. Things like that, like Battlefield of Eternity, maybe you might try and go into Beetles. It gives you vision. It does a lot of things for you. Cocoon into Burning Beetles or Urticating Spines. If you went W build at 4 and 7, I would highly recommend going this. Else Burning Beetles is okay. Acid Drenched Mandibles like 2 years ago. And I went over these at length, but going into Beetles if necessary. Debilitation if their comp calls for it. But mostly Epicenter is fine. And then rewind. And that's pretty much how you want to play Anub'arak. You don't necessarily want to play Anub'arak on maps that need a lot of wave clear, that are normally kind of standoutish. Battlefield of Eternity is kind of like that. It's a standoff moment, right? And you look for those opportunities. Tomb of the Spider Queen feels real bad. Regen Master would be completed, but overall, Anub'arak doesn't really show up there. Maps where you know that there's chokes and people are going to group up can work out heavily in your favor. Because Anub'arak is mostly an offensive, hard engage hero, I'm never picking Anub'arak early. If I pick Anub'arak early, I anticipate them picking Raynor, Cassia, Gold, Greymane, all of these people to just auto attack me. My health bar is so low, and there's nothing I can do about it. I either have to stand there and take it, or I have to leave. And that sucks as a tank. And if you can just get poked out by an auto attacker, which Anub'arak very much can, and if you're going against an Anub'arak and you pick double mage into it, shame on you. Pick a boring hero like Raynor and just auto attack for a long time. I guarantee you the Anub'arak can't stay there for very long. When Anub'arak has 30% less health than Stitches, yes, I will poke that all day. So try and keep that in mind when you're picking Anub'arak. It really is a late draft pick into a specific comp with a specific comp, and that's what makes him more of a niche hero. If you're forcing Anub'arak, it's because you're just kind of trolling your team and you're just having a little bit of fun, and if that's you, then so be it. I would recommend not doing that, and making sure to pick Anub'arak when and where and when it's necessary. And if you can't get any other tank and you don't know how to play any other tank, I would recommend picking a different role. Anub'arak is not super meta in the slightest degree. He is very much a super niche hero. So keep that in mind when picking Anub'arak, and good luck.